Just about there. All right. So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the next workshop in our virtual ministry fair, Servants of the Spirit, Gifts for Ministry.
Parte del programa de uno en el espíritu. Sorry,
I was just about to get there with the interpretation instructions. All right, so this is the next workshop in our series, Servants of the Spirit, Gifts for Ministry. First, I'd like to thank Ms. Ada Ramirez for providing providing Spanish translation for today's session. There is no default language, so please be sure to click on the interpretation icon at the bottom of your screen and select either English or Spanish. As a reminder, this session is being live streamed to the Diocesan Facebook page and YouTube channel and will be available for viewing on demand. A link to the video along with the resources presented will also be available on the EDLA Convention website at diocesanconvention.com. We're joined today by Davey Gerhard, Executive Director of TENS, the Episcopal Network for Stewardship, and member of the Program Group on Stewardship, to talk about inspiring intergenerational giving. At this time, I ask everyone to please mute yourselves, but we would love to hear from you anytime you have questions or comments. So please feel free to put them in the chat and we'll answer them in the order asked. And now I turn it to you, Davey.
Thank you very much, Samantha, for your invitation to join you. It's been a pleasure to serve on the Diocesan Stewardship Group and to do these webinars last year and this year. So thank you to all who are watching live stream and who will be watching in the future. And those of you who have joined us today, I really appreciate it. I'm going to be sharing slides tonight, and those slides will also be posted in English and Spanish on your website so that you can download them later, but we have those available. When we are in screen share, I won't be able to see all of you. So if you have a burning urgent question and you need to ask it, please use your reaction button, and use the raise hand function that will let me know that you're trying to get my attention, and I'll try my best to answer your question. I'll also stop about halfway through our presentation and bring us back into this group for a little bit so that we can ask any questions on stuff that's happened, and then we'll go forward. So lots of opportunity today to answer your questions. With that, I'm going to share my screen and we'll get rolling here. All right, thank you for joining this session. We're talking about intergenerational stewardship and trying to talk about case statements, cases for support, how we market our message of pledge campaigns, and how we talk to the various constituencies, if you'll allow me to use that word, within our congregations. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that today. Let me go through our learning objectives. We'll talk a little bit about what is a case for support and why you might want a case for support for your pledge campaign. It's not something we always think about. We do sometimes brochures or letters, but a case for support has a particular methodology behind it, and it helps us tell the story of our campaign, helps put our measure our impact and get people to think about why they are being asked to support and give to this campaign. We're going to talk about generational differences in donor engagement. We're going to use some really broad data to talk about the different generations that are contributing to our congregation's success right now, and how they perceive information, how they receive information, how they make decisions, and how they like to stay engaged. We'll talk a little bit about what goes into a case for support, so the craft of how you put all of this information together and make your best pitch to your members and your donors. A case for support tells your story in order to connect your members and your mission and vision and to build commitment to your goals. The idea here is that a case for support will really help you frame the work that your congregation does, inward and outward, how you serve your community, the people gathered, and the people in your neighborhood. When it tells that story, it tells it through numbers, tells it through pictures, tells it through testimonials. And we use all of these tools to help us create a really good picture of how your church is making an impact in the world. All good cases for support start with a vision and a plan. If you have a strategic plan, it's time to blow the dust off of it or find it on your hard drive and reactivate it. Take a look at it. Maybe your congregation did some strategic planning with a consultant some time ago, or your vestry went on a great retreat and came back with some items to put in your plan. If you have a plan, let's start there and take a look at it. If you don't have a strategic plan, or if your strategic plan is really out of date, as most of ours could be, no problem. Start now and take a look at the goals of your ministry or your ministries. What are you trying to achieve? What are you trying to do in your neighborhood? What are you trying to do in your own congregation? Is it about growing your membership? Is it about engaging your neighborhood? Is it about civic responsibility? Is it about social justice? Is it all of those? And how do you prioritize them? We'll want to take a look, and you'll want to take a look at the measurable impact you have in your community. We do this work, and we don't often think in church that we need to provide numbers and metrics, right? We tell a lot of stories. In fact, that is what our methodology is usually about. We like time to tell stories and share vision. That's how we communicate the good news. But good news can also be communicated in numbers. And when we assign data, when we look at our metrics, and when we take a look at how our ministries impact our neighborhoods, we get another way into describing what we do and helping other people learn what to do and what we're doing. This is really important. We're trying to make the connection with our members and with people who are observing us and coming into us to learn how we engage with the world around us and how we can support it. Your case should remind your members why their gifts are important by reminding them what impact they have. It's great to talk about your food program or your after-school tutoring. It's even better to talk about how many people you feed, or where your students are coming from, or what you try to teach them. It's really good to have some numbers behind that, some metrics. We serve 150 meals a week. This is a great number, right? And then we can frame it, right? Is our food program doing this, or is it doing that? And any way we're doing that work is really important. So find a way to collect those metrics and then make them exciting. Tell the story about them. Your case should motivate members to think generously. I put this in because often our stewardship campaigns can sometimes look like a fear-based model. Our church is in dire straits, or we're losing members, or we really need to grow, we're really worried. And those are all things that we might be feeling. They might be anxieties that we have, but they're not actually inspirational. So let's focus on the positive. Let's find the things that we're doing and want to do in our community that will inspire people to give, that will make people feel excited. Fear is a motivation, but it's not a good one, and it doesn't make us feel generous. It makes us feel anxious. So let's make our members excited about how they can participate in our mission and in our work in the world. Finally, your case for support will become the template or your talking points for your pledge campaign, for your social media, to put on your website. It's my hope that everyone in your congregation can articulate why they support your church with their gifts of time, talent, and treasure. It's really important that they have a couple of things. I love the music. I care about the sermons. I love the people that we serve in our neighborhood. I'm really proud of the fact that we have a clothing drive every year. What are your points, your talking points of ministry in your congregation that make you excited to pledge and pledge your support of time, talent, and treasure to your church. So the more we can develop a case, the more we can help people tease out their own talking points. That makes them ambassadors, dare I say, even evangelists. That makes them, it helps them, enables them to tell the story of your church in the world, to each other, to their friends and neighbors, to the world at large. So we're going to talk later about how we craft our statement, our support, but I want to outline some process for you now. And first among it is that our cases for support are really important documents, as I'm outlining, but they need a draft and they need to be tested. I have seen great cases for support go forward, even go to the printers that haven't been tested on the people that they're going to be used on, right? So what happens then is that maybe your messaging is falling flat. Maybe you're telling things that everybody already knows, and so why waste the paper space to do it? Or maybe you're not inspiring people. Maybe your message is just falling flat and you weren't aware of it. So it's really important when we start talking about our case for support and how we market our mission and our message to our members, that we test it out on a sample of our congregation, a sample that looks and feels like the people in our congregation, not just your vestry or not just your stewardship committee, not just your leadership, but try to pick a broad spectrum of folks in your congregation that will test your messaging, that will hear it, that will give you feedback. Take a look at different generations and longevity of membership, and also make sure you incorporate the various gender and ethnic identities that are existing in your congregation so that you can really understand how your message is perceived and how it's received. Testing might seem like an added element of your timeline, and it does take time, but build it in. Build that 2 weeks or whatever it is into your timeline so that you can test your message, so you can refine your message, so you can get out your red pen and edit and make some changes based on what good people prayerfully considering your case want to tell you about how your message is being received. We might find, and it's common in our congregations, that one size does not fit all when it comes to talking about our ministry and our mission. We might think, because it appeals to us, I might think because it appeals to me, that the most exciting thing to talk about is whatever, right? But that might fall flat with someone else. That might not be their draw, or that might not be what brought them into the church. So having multiple messages and knowing various constituencies within our congregations helps us then to tailor or refine or nuance our messaging for those various characteristics that exist. So for example, when you put your stewardship information together, your case for support and your pledge card, do your newcomers need a special introduction? Maybe they've come from a tradition in which pledging isn't common. Do they know why these crazy Episcopalians do this pledging and how it makes our budgets and how we think about the world? So what work do we have to do with newcomers when we talk about our case? What about different generations? And we're going to go into this in a moment. Let's take a look at who's in the pews and what motivates them and what's interested in them. When we know then how they're motivated, we can then help them understand our case, because then we can know something about them and they can know something about us. Many of our congregations receive a little bit of outside funding, sometimes a lot of outside funding from various charitable organizations, community foundations, family foundations, or corporate or local businesses. A lot of large retailers, for example, will give community support grants of $500 or $1,000 or $1,200 a year, which aren't much, but could be a little shot in the arm for a great ministry in your congregation. So what do they need to know about your mission? They might need to know different things than your members, right? They might want to know how many services do you have, and who are the people that come to your church, and how many people does your message receive, or how many people receive your messaging. That helps them say, well, this is a good investment, this church, so we'll make a grant for them. Not all community support organizations will give grants to religious organizations. We know this, but some will. And so if you found a family foundation that includes religious giving in its guidelines, how will you write a proposal? How will you use the materials that you've spent time creating to help them understand what your mission is and what your need is? So what I'm trying to say, and what I hope that we're going to get to here, is that we need to nuance our messaging. One size does not fit all. So let's talk about these generational differences and how they impact donor motivation. How you message to different generations matters. Let's talk for a moment and realize that because of medical science, because of the world that we live in, we have more generations alive and actively donating in our congregations than at any other time in history. We have 5 generations that are making gifts to church right now, all at once. This is unprecedented. We haven't had this before. So that means that we have an income coming from a really broad range of ages. People who were born in a war, and people who are born just very recently, starting to come together and try to find mission and message together. And they're all making gifts to support the church. This is really unique in our history as a community of faith. And so let's take a look at these different generations and see just how they're motivated. The data that I'm going to present comes from the Lake Institute of Faith and Giving, which is an institute out of the Lilly School of Philanthropy at Indiana University. The Lake Institute is a great ecumenical organization that specifically looks at religious fundraising. And they commissioned a study in 2019 that went deep into denominations and the study is really thick. It's a really exciting study, if you like numbers and such, that talks about how we engage with message, how we raise money, and what that is all about. And they did a lot of work on generational differences. So let's take a look at our oldest generation, the folks that we call the matures, people born 1945 and earlier. Again, what I want to reiterate here is that these are very broad, universal, general statistics. We all will think of people who this does not apply to, and those outliers or those people are perfectly fine and perfectly rational people. But we're looking at a subset here, and we're looking at some average data. So I just want to be clear that these are big, broad numbers. So this generation is churched, we will say. 60% of this generation donates to a church or some sort of religious institution, temple, mosque, synagogue. This generation knows institution, trusts institution, and is willing to invest in institution. They're our longest time donors, not just because of their longevity, but because they get the message, they understand it. They volunteer with the church, maybe not in the numbers they used to, but 51% of this generation volunteers in their religious organization. So this is also really important because we are thinking about how we share our time and our talent and our treasure. This generation, very generous with its time as well. This generation, the matures, are most interested in supporting the institution for the work that it does as it is an institution. This generation trusts institutions in a way that all of our younger generations that we'll look at in a second don't. This generation understands that the church has been there for them and wants the church to be there for their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and this really matters to them. They grew up in a time when institutions were trusted and should be trusted. And so if the church asks, they will give. They're very loyal members that way. You should be looking at this generation for making great annual gifts, but understand now that they're likely making them from retirement accounts. They're probably out of their earning years and into retirement living. So they might give differently. They might give out of their required minimum distribution or other ways that they give through their retirement accounts. They might still make generous annual gifts to our pledge campaign, but maybe not in the way that they might have when they were at their highest earning potential. But they're still making loyal gifts. You should still ask them and expect of them. They're great for capital gifts. Again, if the church asks, they will give because they understand church and they want the church to be there. So this generation understands capital giving. They may not have a lot to give in terms of immediate cash, but what they do have are appreciated assets, stocks and securities and other things that they can make gifts of to capital campaigns that can become very generous lifeblood gifts for a church. This generation also, if you have not asked them or entered into a conversation with them about making a planned gift or an estate gift to your church, it is absolutely time. They have likely made their wills. Perhaps they've left the church in the will. We find out most often from people that they left the church in their will after they've passed, and we get a letter from a lawyer and a check that accompanies it. That's great, but wouldn't it be nice to know now and have that conversation now so that we can celebrate them and thank them for the work that they will do and continue to support our church? There are also plenty of other ways, and the older a person is, the more favorable something like a charitable gift annuity or a remainder trust can be. They can get really big tax advantages now, and they can get a high rate of return because of their advanced years. And this means that they can really get a nice income, and the church will get a lovely gift. So if you're not talking to them about planned giving, please put it on your to-do list. This is really important for this generation. Also, they will get it. They will understand planned giving in a way that our younger generations won't. Estate gifts are really important to this generation. Let's take a look at our baby boomers, born 1946 to 1964. So less churched than the other generation. So just under half will donate to a religious institution and about the same number volunteer with a church. So they're moving tables, they are running bake sales, they are helping on church leadership, they are lending their advice and their wisdom and their consultancies. This is really important for this generation. They get it. They have been shaken by some institutional faith. They've seen things like Watergate, and they understand how things can go wrong with institutions. And so they might ask more questions than their parents or grandparents did about the institution before they make their gift. This generation might want to take a look at the books or really know what the budget is or understand it from a different perspective. They might want to go a little deeper before they make a large gift, like a planned gift or a capital gift. They might want to see the numbers. Make sure that you have them available. Make sure that you give them a chance to do that, because this generation will make exceedingly generous gifts if given the opportunity. This generation might be entering retirement, or they may still be in their highest earning years. That means they are making great annual gifts to your church, and you can count on them for that. They will also make really good capital campaign gifts. So if you are running a capital campaign and you're thinking about running your capital campaign, and you have a lot of baby boomers and a lot of mature folks in your congregation, it's a good time for a capital campaign because they have those appreciated stocks to give. They have wisdom to lend to a campaign, and they will give generously. This generation is also absolutely on your list for planned gifts. So if you aren't talking to them about planned giving, please put them on your list. And there are different ways that this generation might be ready to think about it. They've probably made their wills, but maybe haven't revisited them recently. They probably have life insurance policies that they took out for their children when they were younger and they needed money in case something went wrong when they were the chief breadwinners in the family. But now those children have grown up and they have their own families and their own incomes. Maybe they don't need those life insurance policies anymore. It takes just a phone call to turn that over to the church and give a beautiful, wonderful gift of life insurance to your church. So all kinds of things from planned giving from this generation can impact your congregation. Please ask them. It's important to note that this generation, our baby boomers alive today, are the wealthiest generation ever to have lived. They have made a lot of money in industry. They have saved it, invested it. We hear a lot of stories about how things go wrong with baby boomers, but as many stories as we hear, there are many more stories about how they've been great at investment. They have big retirement accounts. They are ready to go and ready to go into their retirement, I should say. And so what we're hoping for here is that they have great wealth to pass on to the church and to succeeding generations. Let's talk about our lost generation, the Gen Xers. They're born from 1965 to 1976. These statistics about donating and volunteering are really interesting to me. So not very churched, less than 40% of us, I say us because this is my generation, less than 40% of us donate to religious institutions. We are one of the first generations to really be unchurched and not come back to church. Maybe we were raised in it and we left it in our college years not to return. And so that's reflected in how membership and pledging happens in this generation with religious institutions. But you'll note that we volunteer in church. And this is about the church being a social organization or a community service organization. And as much as we are proclaiming the good news, we're also doing good works. And those good works attract volunteers. And so this generation is heavily involved in running your programs, in your food banks, in your ministries, your external ministries. They will volunteer before they will make a gift. That's important to note because stewardship is, after all, about our time and our talent as well. It's not just about our treasure. So if what you can get from these folks are their time and their talent, and that's how you can bring them into an understanding of the good news and have them spread the gospel that way, this is a beautiful opportunity for discipleship and evangelism. This generation has really seen not just government failure, but corporate failure. CEOs being shackled, Enron and WorldCom happened in this generation's memory. We've seen it all. And so we have a lot of distrust for institution. That's some of the reason why this generation doesn't give very heavily to churches as much as it could. Although this generation is right in the middle of its highest earning years. And so still possibly raising families or just recently empty nesters. This generation has a lot of disposable income, and they're making really great salaries, and they're really engaged with their community. They are giving a lot to charity, this generation is. And so our churches should be in line too for this, and we should be finding the ways to connect with them. This generation might not be excited about talking about planned or estate gifts yet. Death might feel like a faraway notion, but they are. But if they respond, that's great. You should always be talking about planned giving in your congregation, and hope that folks take you up on that offer. But this generation is making generous annual gifts when asked, and making very generous capital gifts as well. They have a lot of stock options that they get, and they're willing to cash those in and give those as securities for capital campaigns. Please ask them. This generation is going to inherit a whole lot of money in the next 15 years. And this is really important. There's going to be a massive transfer of wealth. Churches should be ready to help people make the decisions about faith and money and journey that come with this responsibility of wealth, and be doing some messaging and bringing people together to talk about social responsibility and how to make moral budgets and household budgeting. This generation is about to get a whole lot wealthier, and that will be important for our churches to step into that and begin to find ways to help them manage that process. Our millennials. So the Gen X, they are sandwiched between these two huge generations, the baby boomers and the millennials, really large generations. The millennials born 1977 to 1995. Not surprising, they're not a terribly highly churched group of folks. 32% give money to a religious institution. A few more volunteer with a religious organization. And this is again saying that this group will volunteer sort of as a sense of, let me get to know you by volunteering with you. If I like what I see, maybe I'll stick around and get to know you more. This generation really sees volunteerism as a first step in. Nonprofits are really noticing this as well and creating volunteer opportunities for this generation to come in, because it gets them familiar with the work that's happening in the nonprofit. So our churches also should be really sending out messages to this group and saying, come and join us and come and be a part of what we're doing, and then building on that and helping people get involved and excited about the work. This generation is very generous. 89% of millennials donate to nonprofits. So they might not be giving huge gifts, but they're giving to nonprofits. 89% of them. Churches are nonprofits. So there's something between that 32% giving to church and 89% of giving to charity that the church needs to say, where are we in this? How can we step in and help this? How do we need to update our messaging? How do we need to market our programs? How do we need to create opportunities to bring this generation in so that they can understand our work? Finally, our youngest generation, our Gen Z folks born before 1996. I love this first statistic, that by 20 years old, 30% have already made a donation to a nonprofit. At 20 years old, I was not making donations to nonprofits. So this is stunning that this generation gets it, that they are engaged and socially aware, and that there are lots of ways for them to give. 97% of this generation has made some kind of online gift for a charitable purpose. Kickstarter, GoFundMe, and as we've seen in our recent election cycles, Small gifts made at regular intervals make a lot of money and create opportunity. This generation might not have a lot to give, but they're making small gifts and they're making them regularly. When you, in your online giving form, switch on that option to make or ask for a recurring gift, and people can give monthly or quarterly right out of their checking account or off their debit card. This is how this generation is used to making gifts. They're most interested in making a difference in the world. And so the church needs to show that the ministry that they're doing is really engaging the neighborhood, is really changing the world. No one can out environmental the Sierra Club, but what is your church doing for environmentalism on a local grassroots level that you could talk about to this generation? What are the kinds of programs that you're running in youth work, in homelessness, in education, in immigration reform, in prison ministry, in the things that you might be doing that this generation could say, they're trying to tackle big issues on a small scale locally, and this generation will understand that and respond to it. But you better give them a way to give online because they don't carry cash and they don't write checks. So make certain that if you want to capture donations from our millennials and our Gen Z, that you have a way to do it online, on their phone. Electronic giving is really essential for this generation. They're least likely to pledge, but they will give when asked. And I think this is probably one of the most important statistics that we can talk about this evening. There's going to be a change in church. We're seeing it already, and there are many changes to come. We know this, but one of them is about the kinds of commitments that our younger generations are interested in making with institutions. The whole notion of pledging or long-term affiliation doesn't sit well with a group of people who move very easily from one city to another, who change careers and jobs. And so the idea of filling out paperwork and pledging might be a foreign concept. And this is only going to increase as our mature folks and our baby boomers exit the scene and stop making gifts into church. The whole notion of pledging is going to change, and the church needs to start to think about how we build our budgets, how we build our fundraising on gifts, and how we ask for it. We may have to start asking more often. We may need to do things other than this once a year pledge campaign idea. We might need to start finding ways to keep asking people to get involved in our program. It's going to mean that we need to change our message and our method. So let's pay attention to this. Our Gen Z folks are raising the flag. Don't give us a pledge form, but we will give money. We will, if you find the way to ask us and receive it, we will give. Let's listen to them. A few last thoughts on appealing to our late Gen X, Millennials, and Gen Zs. Results are really important. So they don't want to maintain the status quo. So if your pledge campaign, if your case for support, we're going to talk about cases for support still, but if your case for support is really about maintaining your program, is about your stained glass and your organ and the things that you do to build your church, that's all fine and good because those are real expenses. Those are things that we have to cover. But we need to find the way to talk about our ministry that engages people and shows results in the world. So we better be able to talk about our pastoral care, the way we care for each other, the way we care for our neighborhood, the way we serve our neighbors. Results are important to this generation. Retention is also really important, and the value of giving and generosity as a discipline. This is what I'm saying when we need to repeat the message more frequently than once a year. We need to give opportunities all year round for this, for our younger members to learn about how they can be involved, how they can participate, how they can make gifts, how they can volunteer. We can't wait all year for a cycle to start again so that we can incorporate new members. Let's meet them where they're at and focus on bringing them in. Encourage volunteerism. This is about making an emotional connection with people when not in a manipulative way, but when we pull on heartstrings, when we make a deep connection between mission and member and help make people feel that depth of community and that depth of feeling, we help people understand where the power of their money is and where the work of the church is. So we need to encourage ways to volunteer. We need to help them build that connection with our programs and our ministries and meet our members, right? When they meet us and they see that we're regular, normal people, they might want to be involved with us, and they could imagine seeing us on a Sunday or on a Saturday afternoon or on a Wednesday night. It's not just about our programs. We will bring them in. And this goes hand in hand with discipleship. How we help people understand, and this is what I'm saying, that we need to be ready to help the youngest generations deal with the massive inheritances that they're going to get. Help them understand that spirituality has a role in their finance. It's not just about the messages from advertising that they're getting about spending, or the messages from banks telling them to save. And it's not just about their student loan debt and things like that. This is about how do we help them form the spiritual foundation, the moral foundation for their money so that they can be productive members of society and hopefully great disciples for Jesus and understand our own church and our programs. I'm halfway through, and so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to pull us together so that we can see each other's faces. And I would love to answer any questions that you might have about what I've covered already. And so hit me with your questions and we can and do that. And then we'll go back into the presentation and finish up with our cases for support.
Hello. You may be getting to this later on, and you can punt it to later on if that's the case. But I'm wondering about your thoughts around how to make volunteerism and kind of involvement be on an equal playing field with financial giving in terms of our messaging, particularly as someone who's in Gen Z. Without my own income, but very, very involved in my church. I was really frustrated last October when the stewardship messaging wasn't geared towards me. I didn't have my own income. And so what was interesting about that was I had to come to my, the offering of everything I am involved in the church as the offering that I make to God and to the church. And I didn't like that I had to come to that on my own. I wish I had heard that from the pulpit. And I know that I may be an oddity in my own community, but there are thousands of us. And so I'm sure that even if you're on the other side of the generational divide and you're emptying it out of an IRA, that's helpful for you to know too. Because, the great irony of the boomers is that there's more volunteers than just people who sit there and like receive. So there's a question in there somewhere, but I'm just really curious what you think about that, because it was something I was thinking about in the last year or so.
Wow, Brooke, thank you for that. And thank you for breaking it open too, because that's what we're talking about here. The church is really good at messaging at families that are earning money, that are making pledges and have income And that's been our sweet spot for a long time, right? So we're good at that messaging. And we're not good yet at messaging to, as you point out, to people who are just coming in to their first jobs and maybe starting to have a little bit of financial independence. So I think I love the way you started that. How can we tie our volunteering with the financial reality of the church? And how can we talk about time, talent, and treasure, two of which you say you're sharing, your time and your talent? And how can we then say, well, these are all parts of the budget that this church needs to operate. And we need your time, and we need your wisdom, we need your ideas. And eventually we hope that you'll have financial gifts to share with us too. But if we can help you now create the generous discipline of giving back when you have more to give, and that's not just more money, but more wisdom and more experience and more time, you'll share that freely, because hopefully that church will have nurtured you and built you along and brought you into that. This is why I think volunteerism is really important for churches to think about. And I think often in church, we don't have time to develop our volunteers because it takes time, right? And people who are running programs are often themselves volunteers, or perhaps only paid a few hours a week by the church to run a ministry. And so taking the time to really recruit, train, support volunteers to help them build that giving back discipleship, I think is something that church hasn't yet figured out. Nonprofits are figuring it out, right? They hire people called volunteer managers, and they do training, and they create job descriptions, and they hold people accountable for volunteering in ways that churches haven't yet been able to do, because we just don't have that infrastructure yet. But I think we're going to need to get really good at it. I also want to say that I think more frequent messaging about morality and money, not heavy-handed, like here's, be successful because God has blessed you and we need to wring the money out of you. We're not talking about that at all. What we're talking about is, how can we help you create your first giving back plan that fits into your world, that fits into your budget, your availability, your own agency, and also helps your generation get out of debt or do the other things that it needs to do, like save up for a first house and give the church money, right? I mean, like, all these things need to happen, and they don't happen well if we're not helping people to do that work. And the church has a role in providing some training or some education about that and talking about morality and money. So, Brooke, I love your question. I love that you're involved in your church, and I'm sorry that your last stewardship campaign didn't open your heart in the way, or didn't impact you in the way that it impacted others. And I hope that we can teach this skill to our clergy and our church leadership so that they can reach out to you and bring you into generosity. Thanks, Brooke.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions? That was a great one.
That was a great one. I don't see anything else in the chat, so I'm thinking let's keep going.
All right. We're going to keep going. We're going to talk now about the art of building your case statement, what it really looks like. Your case for support is the story of your church and the story of your money. It's not just your budget. It's not just a narrative budget. It's not just a pledge card. It talks about your history, your impact in the community, what you do and how you do it, what your method is, and how people can help and get involved. In essence, it's your plan to change the world or your little piece of it. A good case should have these 6 elements. It should have some sort of organizational history. How long have you been there? What are you doing? Why are you there? Who are you? And we're going to go through these questions in more detail in a minute. It should talk about who you serve, like who's in your neighborhood. What are your programs geared for? Are they inward, outward? Are they both? How do we do that? We should talk about our needs and challenges. And this is really important. There is room in a case for support to talk about things that you are challenged by, things that you want to do better, areas of growth. It's all good news if you frame it as such, but we can talk about our challenges and our needs in a way in our case statement. They should be honest statements so that we can really understand what we're doing. There should be evidence of good stewardship, and we'll talk about that in more detail. People should be able to trust you and get some trust from you in a case statement. You should talk about your goals for future ministry. So what are you trying to do? There should be some aspiration along with your inspiration. And always, 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 please tell people how they can participate and how they can support you. I have seen the most beautiful case statements gone off to the printer, come back, people spent real money on it, and nowhere on it does it say where you can send your check or how you can make an online payment or what to do with your gift, right? We think everybody knows it, but not everybody does. So please make sure that on your case for support, you leave room to tell people how they too can make their gift. So let's talk about your organizational history for a little bit. It's nice to know, and there are people in your church who do, how you were founded, who founded you, why did you pick the name, why are you St. Paul and not St. Stephen? What was it just about the proximity of the birthday of the saint, or does it have some other impact on the charism of your community? Was there a founding family or families or a founding group? Did you come from another congregation? Were you a plant or a mission? Or did it spring up in the city as the city grew? Why are you in a particular neighborhood? This is often the case when we look at our urban churches. You can find a church in one neighborhood and just like a couple blocks over, there's another church. Why are there 2 churches here? How did this happen? Is it because there were different demographics at one point, or the neighborhoods were different, or it just took too long to get there by horse or whatever? Like, how do we make these decisions and how did we make these plans? Have there been or are there now people of importance? We're all important as children of God, but some of us rise to notoriety in other ways. So are there civic leaders? Are there leaders of industry or other of nonprofit, historically interesting people who have attended? Take a look at your stained glass windows. What are the names on it? What are these families? Who are they? I was visiting a church here in the Bay Area, St. James in Fremont, California. And you can look at the names on the stained glass windows and then drive through the town, and the streets have the same names because they're all founding families of this town, right? And so there's a history there, a connection, albeit 140 years ago, with this place and this church. And so what's the story there? That story may have changed. And then it's an even more interesting story to tell. So do a little work, do open up those archives, find someone in your church who knows the history and would love to spend a Saturday afternoon telling you all about it, and answer those questions. You can learn a lot about how your church came to be. Why is this interesting? Because it talks about then who we are. It locates us in a time and a place. And it helps give us the foundation that people have been supporting this church for a very long time in very many ways. Who are your neighbors and what are they about? So how would you describe your community? What's the character of your community? All these questions I'm posing are things that you can run through in your process of creating your case for support. If you answer these questions and start to create an outline, you start to create how you might put that document together. So how would you describe yourself if you had one word or a couple of words to do it? Who are the people who are served by your outward focused ministries? Are you feeding people? Are you visiting people in a prison? Do you have an affiliation with a local school and so you do some after school work or a school breakfast program? What sorts of things are you doing in your neighborhood? Who are the people that you're serving? Who are served by your inward focused ministries. So let's look at your pastoral care and your social groups, your fellowship. What are you doing? Do you have a yoga group that meets, a games night that happens, a teenage or a youth group or a college age kid? Do you do something special for your seniors? They meet for breakfast every Wednesday morning or Bible study or whatever. Name those communities and name those ministries because they're a part of your mission as well. And finally, do you have support groups? Do you open your doors? I know it's been difficult in 2020 and 2021 to open our doors to people, but in general, do you have scout troops that meet with you or 12-step groups? Does your neighborhood rent space or use space in your sanctuary for a community meeting or something like that? Do you have nonprofits that rent your space? What are they doing? What sorts of things are? I love it when a nonprofit is renting like some little office space in a church, and then you have this automatic connection with this great institution that's doing cool work in the world. So find those stories and talk about them. What do your neighbors need from you? This is a part of that aspirational piece of a case for support. So you might take a look around your neighborhood and say, what are our neighbors doing? And could we be creating opportunities for outreach or volunteerism based on the people who are here? About 20 years ago, my congregation here in San Francisco, Holy Innocents in the Noe Valley neighborhood, we were doing a day of strategic planning, and we'd all gathered, and a part of our morning work was to take a walk through the neighborhood in twos and threes and take a look at who was out and about, what stores were open, what nonprofits, what schools, what kinds of people we saw, and take notes, right? And a group of us came back all grumbling about walking down 24th Street and not being able to get past all the strollers. And then we had this moment and we're like, we might be doing something for people with strollers. Maybe we need a family ministry. If they're all out there so much so that we can't get down the sidewalk, then maybe we need to create some opportunities for families to find us and do some things. That was 24th Street. We're on 26th Street. There's not a big difference there, right? So how can we bring them down? And 20 years later, we have a really super vibrant children and family ministry. We added a third service to accommodate it. And we've been doing that for 2 decades now, because we had that experience of walking the neighborhood and getting to know our community. This is a great exercise in helping you be aspirational about your case for support and learning about what you need to do. You should have some evidence of good stewardship. This is important because you want people to be able to trust you. So along with your case for support in your stewardship documents, you should have a copy of the budget. And if you do a narrative budget, you should include that as well. You should let people know what their input into the budget is. You discuss it at the annual meeting. It's the December vestry meeting where it gets planned. How do you talk to your wardens about things that concern you? What's your opportunity for feedback? Let's talk about our process, because we all have one in our church, whether we remember it or not. We, the people, have a voice on our vestry and then in the way our program is run. Do you post your budget? Is it on your website or on a bulletin board in your parish hall? Have you made your fundraising goals really clear? So what are you asking for? We're trying to raise this much money this year. We need this many volunteers. We need these kinds of in-kind donations. We're trying to fill these positions in our leadership or in our guilds or in our committees. Are your vestry meetings open? Do you publish your vestry minutes? It's fine if your vestry meetings are open. I think very few people are going to take you up on the offer of spending time in a vestry meeting if they don't have to be there. But it's nice to know that you can drop in if your bylaws permit it and attend a meeting and see what's going on, how decisions are made. Where do you find the minutes from your vestry meetings? Are they posted somewhere? Or do they just sit in a file cabinet somewhere or in somebody's hard drive? And finally, if there's something big going on in your neighborhood, and right now a lot of our congregations are talking about rebuilding after a couple of years, and if that's financial rebuilding or membership rebuilding or both, we should be clear about that too. When we don't discuss obvious program or problems, they become elephants in the room, right? They become things that we avoid, and then they're things people might have questions about and want to investigate further. So if you are planning a period of recovery or rebuilding after an event or responding to something in the community, name it, put a timeline around it. If it's not already solved, talk about the steps you're taking or your plan to arrive at a solution. Help people understand that you're being responsive to what's going on in your church and in the community. Your leadership is forward thinking. They should be thinking about your goals for the future. So not just describing the year that we passed, but talking about the year to come and what we're really hoping to do. A lot of our stewardship materials reflect on the things we know. We fed this many people last year. Well, how many people do we want to feed this year? So talk about that, because it's helping people say, my gift has impact on this. My gift will enable this to happen. So talk about your goals for your ministry, for your membership. Are you trying to grow? Do you want X number of new families this year? Name the goal. If people know what it is, they can pray about it and they can help you enact it. They can make it happen. If we don't know what we're trying to work toward, we don't know how to help you get there. So make sure you name what your goals are. Are there building goals or staffing goals? We'd like to raise our youth minister from 50% to 100% this year, and it's going to require this much money. What are you trying to get to? Help people understand the steps you're taking. If there are predictable future events, like we know an industry is about to close in our town and it's going to lay people off, or if the local food bank is going through, or the school district is undergoing something, and we want to be able to say, this is how we are going to help our community respond to this. These are great things that show our transparency and our forward-thinking leadership, and they give people an aspiration and an inspiration. Again, don't forget to tell people how they can give, how they can make a gift, how they can let you know that they have made a gift, and how you want them to engage with you. And give them all the options, as many options as you can sustain. Make sure that there's a mobile option, an online option, using your social media channels. For people who want to give securities or from their required minimum distribution or other qualified charitable distributions, make sure they know if there's any paperwork you require or a special process, make sure they know that and that they have it, or that there's a box to check to have it sent to them. If they are doing a bank check or a bill pay using their bank's bill pay service, make sure that they know that that's an option. And always, always ask them to let you know if they've left the church in the will, if they'd like more information on your planned giving or legacy society. Get them to engage with you and give them all the options for how to engage. Finally, take everything and make it as concise as possible. So I've just run through about 100 questions that you want to ask and answer and think about as you're writing your case for support. But at the end of the day, we need a document that's concise, that tells the story and gives people a really good call to action in a way that they can respond to it. So make your ask specific. Rule number 101 in fundraising is a general ask yields a general result. If you say we'd like everyone to give, then some people will. But if you target your ask, we need you to give this, we want this percentage increase, or we're trying to fund this. This is what our goal is this year. We need, 3 families to step up and make $25,000 gifts this year. Is it you? Help people understand how they can participate, what your goals are, what you're asking them to do. The clearer you can be, the more concise you can be, the more people can help you achieve your goals. This is really easy and important to remember. Also include other things like volunteers. We're looking for this many volunteers. Make sure you're really clear about that. And finally, don't forget that draft. Write it, test it, redline it, edit it, pass it by that person who likes a minimum of words and will critique. I have one of these because I can write 4 paragraphs to say 1 sentence. So I have people who will redline and cross out and send it back to me and say, you can do better. And I appreciate that. Your case for support should also have a way for people to make feedback and give you a better, more concise, clearer case for support. Here's a little challenge for you. And I put this to the Diocese of Los Angeles last year. A couple of people were so interested that they asked me more detailed questions. They really wanted to see how to do this. So my challenge to you is if you can get your case to fit on the front and back of a 3x5 card, you have made a great case for support. Now, I know it doesn't leave much room for testimonials. It doesn't leave a whole lot of room for anything. And this is as much a thought exercise as perhaps it is a real exercise. Although there are lots of ways you could create a front and back card like this and leave it in the back of the church for people to pick up, because it's easy to do and it tells you exactly what you need. You figure out what your ministry is and figure out how to show the metrics and the data, and then tell a little piece of your history and give people a way to respond. If you can get your message as tight and concise as this, you've got a really clear message. It won't respond to everyone. Some people need more language, and we'll give them that. But this is just a little exercise for you. So to finish up, what makes for a good case? Pictures. Pictures are great because they tell stories without words. They allow you to put some design and color into a document and show what you're doing without having to do lengthy descriptions of it. Show great pictures. Take good pictures, please. My favorite Episcopal Church, not favorite, Episcopal Church pictures are people singing with the bulletin in front of their faces. This makes a terrible picture, but it's very common in our church literature. Also, people attending a workshop and you see the backs of their heads. Another classic one. So don't do that. Show people smile, show still life, show engagement, show people doing things, and make certain if you are going to post it on your website that you get permission, especially if children are involved. Make sure you get permission from the parents to do that so that there are no surprises. But take good pictures. We all have cameras on our phone now. We can take lots of pictures and edit most of them away. Use your best ones. Minimize your copy. Use tight sentences and action-oriented words. This is what advertising tells us, right? So they take big concepts and they put it down into 1 or 2 keywords, and those words are short and punchy. Use as many of those as you can when describing your ministry, because it'll help people through its clarity understand what your purpose is. Whenever possible, use numbers. Numbers tell a story, not the whole story, but they tell a story about how you serve people and what your impact is. Try to tell some story if you can. Testimonials are great stories. So if you do this at the announcements in your stewardship campaign, also put one of these stories into your stewardship literature, into your case for support. A great story told concisely about why somebody supports your church or why it matters to them, or how they came the first Sunday and stuck around for the next. These are great stories that talk about why people support you and why they're called, and then we can identify with them. If you have some internal or external ministries that you want to highlight and you want to tell specific stories from them, they're also helpful to illustrate impact of our ministry. So if it's appropriate to have somebody who volunteers or maybe even benefits from one of your social ministries or your outreach ministries, if it's appropriate for them to share a piece of their story or what it means to them to receive your service, it's great to include a story like that because it directly impacts our meaning to our mission, and then and gives us that feedback that we need, that our mission and our money is doing work in the world. So please use testimonials when you can. Always begin, continue, and finish with gratitude and generosity, because that's what motivates us to do the work that we're doing. I'm going to stop us again, and I'm going to pull us back in. We've got a few minutes left to ask and answer any questions that you might have for today, and I want to make sure that you get your questions answered. I'll be sharing these slides, and they'll go up on your website. So all those questions that I asked you to ask yourselves, you'll have access to, and you don't have to worry about them. But let's hear your questions and how I can help you this evening think about your cases for support and how to reach out to different generations.
As Davey mentioned, we will have these slides up on the convention website. That'll be at diocesanconvention.com. So if you've got any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat or raise your hand. Brooke, I saw you unmuted. Did you have something?
Questions. I made myself count to 10. First, with across the spectrum of churches and institutions you work with, would you say that before you get to them, or before TENS gets to them, would you say that the kind of direct, like measurable goals, being frank about that, is normative before you engage with them or not, because I just think that's really smart. And I think people should do that. And so I just wondered, like, across churches, are people doing that, or is that something that we are slower because we're Episcopalian and we're white to talk about what we want. Is that to say we want to raise our director of education salary by 50%, and so this is what we need from everyone?
Great. I love your question and thank you for it. The first answer is no, it is not normative for us to give a lot of metrics and to share a lot of data. I was laughing with a colleague recently, and we were remarking on the fact that for a group of people who are commanded by their prophet to share the good news, we are terrible communicators. We do not say enough about the good work we are doing in the world, and we need to be better about it. So thing one is we all need to be better evangelists, better marketers. Use the word that's comfortable to you. We need to share the work that we're doing and tell the story. There is great news about it. And so I don't think it's normative for most congregations to talk about the great things they're doing. They might say we have these ministries and list them. They might even talk a little bit about what they're doing, but really being excited about them. And right, they're great. They're changing somebody's life, right? So be excited about that. And it's a really wonderful way to evangelize. The other part of your question, is it normative for congregations to be really clear about what they're asking for? I think sometimes we do, in general terms, say we want to hire a church administrator, or we need to raise money for this. But the more we can be specific about the exact amount or what it will take or the jump we need to make. So, hiring our youth minister at 100% is going to be this percentage jump in our budget. And so that means that our stewardship needs to increase by this much, right? And make the connection for people. Don't rely on people to do their own math. If you can do the math for them, then they can directly say, oh, well, then if I increase my pledge, if I make these gifts, if I can do this work, then this is how this can be accomplished. And I do my piece and you do your piece, and then we all make this happen. So I think more specificity is better.
Mm-hmm. And we actually have a comment in the chat about that. Interested in examples of volunteerism goals being shown in budgets, dovetailing with Brooke's earlier question.
I love that. And I love to put this in not in budgets, but in the case for support. We need this many volunteers. It takes this many volunteers to run our program. I like to put that in. Some congregations, and I've seen it from time to time, try to quantify the value of their volunteers. We get $100,000 worth of staff service from our volunteers, for example, they might say. I think that's really hard because it's not a real number and it doesn't impact our budgets. And what does it mean anyway? But I have seen it in budgets before, and I don't always understand how it goes into a budget. But I think some communities, it does work, just like some communities like to quantify the in-kind gifts that they get. We rely on gifts to support this ministry, gifts of things, stuff, furniture to sell or clothes to distribute or whatever, and they are often valued at an amount. But because that doesn't have a direct impact on a budget, it's a number that doesn't have a budget or an income or an expense attached to it. It's hard to say, but I like the idea. Certainly putting a request and a goal for volunteers in your case for support or on your pledge card, I'm going to volunteer this year. I volunteer my time. I can give 10 hours a week to this thing. Asking people to pledge their time is a beautiful way to ask and expect that. So I've seen it in the case for support and on a pledge card where we ask people to actually make that commitment. I'm going to join the Flower Guild and I can't wait to do it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Susan, for your question.
And Brooke has a follow-up question about other resources that TENS has.
Oh my goodness, do we have resources? So we have a great document on how to create a narrative budget. It'll help you take your Excel spreadsheet budget and turn it into a narrative budget document. A narrative budget takes your fixed costs like salaries and benefits, like utilities and insurance, like buildings and grounds, and spreads them out into your ministry areas. So your children's ministry, for example, takes X percentage of your clergy time and X percentage of your children and youth staff time, and so much of your building and so much of, so it quantifies the cost of a ministry by taking those big fixed costs and siloing them. It helps us understand our budget in a different way than the line item budget does. So TENS has released and created that document this year. We have great resources for thinking about your budget in general. How do you make a mission-based budget? We're about to release a document on Xero-based budgeting. That's the process of starting from scratch and not just saying we're going to take last year's budget, duplicate it, and add some new things, but saying every year, no, we start from zero and we build our ministries back up in their budgets. So we're gonna talk about that. Our website, tens.org, has all kinds of great things in the resource library on how to form a stewardship committee, how to create great liturgy for stewardship, and lots of tools. So please take a look. And if you have questions, email me, and I'd love to walk through them with you.
So we're just about at the end of our time. I just wanted to make a quick comment with the study that you presented and all the different generations. I loved how even though every generation with a different age, coming from a different context, having different resources and assets available, fundamentally, no matter what, everybody is generous and looking to give. And I loved that. So I wanted to say that. And I wanted to thank you also. So that wraps up our time for tonight. Thank you so much, Davey. Thank you, Ada. Thank everyone for joining us this evening. As a reminder, this session was live streamed to the Diocesan Facebook page and YouTube channel. The resources will be posted on the convention website at www.diocesanconvention.com. The website also has the schedule for upcoming stewardship workshops and the links to register. So that's it from me. I want to thank you all and have a good night.
Thank you, friends. Thank you for your time. We'll see you again soon.